What's up, everybody? So this video is going to contain some spoilers for The Batman, so watch with caution, I guess. In today's video, I'm going to be ranking the top 5 villains that I would like to see in The Batman Part 2, or whatever it's going to be. I'm going to be saying what villains I want to see, why I want to see them. It's just another video of me listing subjective opinions and then going on to justify them. So if that tickles your pickle, stay tuned, because this is the video for you. In at number 5 is Harvey Dent, aka Two-Face. I feel like Two-Face would be a good villain to take that second chapter forward. The Batman was all about Batman discovering new ways to help Gotham City beyond just being this figure of vengeance and intimidation. Bruce Wayne wasn't really an active participant in Gotham City. By introducing Harvey Dent, we can see Bruce Wayne come out a little more and play an active role in Gotham City politics. As well as that, presumably we'll be seeing more of that Bruce Wayne side coming out and seeing more of that dichotomy between Bruce Wayne and the Batman. As in the first film, the line between Bruce Wayne and Batman was very blurred. We can maybe see that start to really get defined in this second one, and I think, you know, we'd have that theme of duality in there, so I think Two-Face would lend well to that as well. There is now a new layer to who Batman is as of the ending of the first film. He has a new approach in his arsenal. It sounded like I said he's got a new approach in his ass. Two-Face, given his kind of split personality and very binary sense of morality, I think would feed into this new, more layered Batman. I think the reason he's at number 5 though, which is the bottom of my list, is simply because I think if you're going to have Two-Face in there, I think you need another villain with him, especially if you're going to do that Two-Face origin story. There's got to be some villain that Bruce Wayne and Two-Face are going up against. But for a story that kind of more focuses on the difference between Bruce Wayne and Batman, vengeance and justice, I think that Two-Face is the perfect villain to be that second chapter adversary for this new Batman. A good way of throwing him headfirst into that whole thing. In 4th place, I've chosen Black Mask, aka Roman Sionis. I think that Black Mask is kind of an underexposed Batman villain. He's got a lot of potential, but we don't really see much of him in external Batman media beyond the comic books. Heck, he's even been overlooked in the Arkham series of video games. We have had a big screen live action portrayal of Black Mask, but it's funny. That version of Black Mask is an interesting one because I actually, like, once I got on board with Ewan McGregor's very campy man-child take on it, I thought this isn't too much of a betrayal of the basic idea of the character. But spoilers for Birds of Prey, they killed him off really quickly and unceremoniously. Black Mask is one of the most vicious, violent, and sadistic Batman enemies, and I'd definitely love to see a more serious portrayal. Not to mention, I think he fits into this story very well. With Gotham flooded or renewed, things are going to get worse before they get better. New gangs are going to rise up. The power is being reshuffled. And Black Mask is also a much more no bullshit crime lord than the Penguin is. As well as that being just a purely human villain, just a crime lord, no, like, major sci-fi or fantasy elements, I think he'd fit well into Matt Reeves' Batman universe. In 3rd place is Professor Pig. This is a Batman villain that hasn't really gotten the recognition he deserved until a little more recently, with appearances in Arkham Knight and the Gotham TV series. Professor Pig, I feel like he could even just, he could warrant his own movie, to be honest. But put simply, the guy's fucking terrifying. Easily the most unhinged of all of Batman's enemies, so much so that, like, he even makes Joker wince a little bit. I also think he'd fit well into this very detective style of Batman that we're getting with the Matt Reeves trilogy. You could have this series of kidnappings, and then of course these people are turned into Pig's Dolatrons. Sure, the Riddler kidnapped and killed people, but he was nowhere near this severe about it. Professor Pig is the next logical extreme. I put him in 3rd place though, because I guess it would make for kind of a repeat of the original The Batman. We'd very much have another movie of Batman hunting for clues and hunting down this villain that is generally out of his reach. Because like Riddler, Professor Pig isn't necessarily a physical threat for the Batman to take on. But that's where I think you could actually have a really layered up sequel. Have Professor Pig as the initial villain, but Two-Face as the main villain, the one who truly challenges Batman in the end. And you could have Bruce Wayne and Harvey Dent kind of working together to try and take down this murderous criminal. I tell you what, though, if you really, really, really want to do Professor Pig justice, it's gotta be R-rated. Although, Matt Reeves has proven that he's really good at pushing the boundaries of what a PG-13 film can do. So I still want to see this. In second place is Scarecrow. Scarecrow is a villain that I think is yet to be done the full justice in live action, at least on the big screen, as we did have a pretty good version of him in Gotham, and I've heard good things about the version that's in Titans as well. With Scarecrow, you can kind of do things one of two ways, or you can kind of combine them, in that you can have a very visceral, psychedelic visual experience, like Batman Arkham Asylum, or you can really have him fuck with his own narrative, making things nigh on impossible for the world's greatest detective to get through, a la Arkham Knight. And I think a mix of both would be great. I just don't feel like we've had that potential even remotely touched by his appearance in Batman Begins and the rest of the Dark Knight trilogy. Obviously, there's a big drug problem with the drops in Gotham, but who makes them? It could potentially be the Scarecrow. And maybe he'll start sort of changing the recipe for this so that he can actually take control over Gotham's crime bosses through fear. And obviously, fear's going to be pretty high after the events of the previous film. Not to mention that this Batman very much uses fear as his tool. So how about having him face off against a villain who also uses fear as a tool? Full stop, I don't really care what version of Batman they do it in, I just really want to see the Scarecrow. And I want him to take top brass. I don't want him to be second banana to Ra's al Ghul. Scarecrow is one of Batman's best villains, and he deserves better. Before we get to my number one spot, I'm going to go through a couple of honorable mentions. Villains who I'd like to see, but I don't think this is the right time for. The Joker. Okay, he's already been teased. It's kind of inevitable that we will be seeing him at some stage in this trilogy, but I personally would be a-okay if they would just hold off on the Joker for a movie. In the previous Batman film series, like in Tim Burton, it started with the Joker, and then in the Dark Knight trilogy, the second film had the Joker, and there's a common contingent is that these films tend to peak at the Joker. So, if this really is just a trilogy, have the Joker as the endgame villain. Someone who Batman knows, but doesn't really come out of the shadows until the very end. I will say this though, there is a promising dynamic between Batman and the Joker in this universe. The two know each other, they've got some background on each other, which makes this a much more interesting dynamic than previous ones where Batman and the Joker have been meeting each other for the very first time. There's a history there, and I like that. I also really like Barry Keoghan's design as the Joker. I like everything we've seen so far. I'm just saying I think they should hold off a little bit. Tease him a little more in the second one by all means, but hold off. Have him as the big bad of the third one. My second honorable mention is the Talon. Now, I'm going to be real, I am questioning if this even suits this version of Batman, given that it is just going to be a trilogy. I feel like the Court of Owls would work better for a long, ongoing Batman series. For starters, we are now one movie into this Batman trilogy, and I still think it's too soon to introduce Robin. And of course, the Talon, William Cobb, is Robin's great-grandfather. Another thing I'll say, though, is that the Court of Owls are such a big threat. They are actively Gotham City going up against the Batman. That feels like a final chapter thing. I don't think that would necessarily work in Batman 2. Much more Batman 3, but then, like, do you have the Court of Owls? Do you have the Joker? Maybe you could find a way to weave them together, but personally, I think that they should just be the big bad of the film if they're going to be in it. Because as far as big bad Batman enemies go, they are probably the largest scale enemy he's ever faced. It's interesting because I think the Matt Reeves version of Gotham City is a very storied place with a great sense of history to it. And, you know, it's got excellent world building. It feels like a very lived-in Gotham, which I feel like would be ripe for the Court of Owls. But I feel like there'd be more like the Batman 4, and given that it's just like a trilogy, maybe I'm overthinking this. It could be that the second one comes along, there's been a time jump, and they've got a Robin in there, but they don't necessarily do Robin's origin story. I want to do a video talking about whether or not Robin should be in the future of the Batman, but I think, you know, when there's the conversation of the Court of Owls, Robin factors into that conversation, and obviously, it depends how comic accurate they want to go, because, like, the Gotham series had the Court of Owls, but I'm going to say this, I love Gotham, but they were the most boring part of the Gotham series. So you got to get them right, that's all I'll say. And in first place is Mr. Freeze. You could have it so that Mr. Freeze's lab was destroyed by the flooding of Gotham, which has obviously put Nora in jeopardy. And put it this way, there are various ways a villain like Mr. Freeze could really exploit the flood in Gotham. I don't think that Matt Reeves' universe so far has necessarily ruled out more sci-fi-ish elements, but there are ways you could still do Mr. Freeze in quite a comic booky way, but is made to fit into this realistic and practical universe. As Batman has become someone who is much more in touch with his humanity, it would be great to see him go up against Mr. Freeze, a man with no sense of humanity left in him. Obviously, though, with Mr. Freeze, there's got to be a guy he wants to take his revenge on. There's got to be someone who's out there to take down. He's got to have a case to make. And in Batman the Animated Series, which was very much the point of origin of the quintessential modern Mr. Freeze, that was Ferris Boyle, the man who rather aggressively shut down Victor's research to save his wife Nora. I guess you could have it so that the flood destroyed Mr. Freeze's lab and research, and that Ferris Boyle is able to help him with that, but he's choosing to help himself instead. And you can even have it so that Batman kind of sees Ferris Boyle as like this humanitarian, this figurehead of Gotham that, you know, fills people with hope and such. He could be someone that's taking advantage of the flooding to make things right. He could be maybe one of the people in charge of getting the waters out of Gotham. By the way, if anyone knows, how the fuck do they get that amount of water out of the city? I'm guessing there's a pump involved. I'm guessing they pump it out. They rebuild the seawalls and then they pump it out of the city. And then you could obviously have Batman taking down this phony baloney fake humanitarian who aggressively neglected Mr. Freeze's wife and put him in a metal suit that he needs to stay in to survive. I wonder if they'll do the metal suit thing. I kind of hope they do. You know, I just want to see a Mr. Freeze that has a dome over his head. We haven't had that. In the 2 live-action versions that we've had, he hasn't had the dome over his head. What's going on here? Warner Brothers, do something about this. Matt Reeves, can you help? I like it when villains have domes over their heads. Anyways, not only do I think Mr. Freeze could actually fit into this story quite well and make for a very intimidating physical force for Batman to go up against compared to, like, the Riddler, for example. Like, Mr. Freeze can actually put up a fight against Batman. I also just think we're well overdue a really great live-action version of Mr. Freeze that truly captures the potential of the character. Yeah, Arnold Schwarzenegger was an absolute meme, and the Gotham version of Mr. Freeze was, well, serviceable. But this character is capable of greatness, and I want to see that tapped into. So that is my list of the top 5 villains that I want to see in The Batman 2. Pop your lists in the comments below, and let's talk about it. But until then, just go. Get out of here. Leave. So what do you guys think? If you enjoyed this video and you want to support more like it, be sure to hit that big, beautiful subscribe button. And of course, in the description below are links to different social media feeds, including the Patreon. If you're feeling extra generous, like the following people, who are JK Strife, Marcus Ward, Sirius the Skeptic, Biotinarts, Mr. SP, David 20 Covers, Sergio, John Comey, Shodin, George is Lost, Legendary Ray Ray, Cheesemaster769, Adam Myers, and Fayalan Schwarzenkraut. Thank you guys, you are the best of the best, but as for the rest of you, thank you so much for watching, guys, and have a great day. Fuck